Hello out there. I recently had the opportunity to present a lightning talk at the BC Library Association's IT and Libraries Pre-Conference in Surrey, BC. That's S-U-R-R-E-Y, not S-O-U-R-I-S-P-E-I, where I was born. Still a fine place, though. As no one was recording the talk, I'll give it again here, but you'll have to supply your own laugh track. And let's minimize and go. Present. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to help represent BC's North Coast. And I thank EBSCO for their generous support, which allowed me to be here today. For those watching on YouTube who don't know, EBSCO provides research databases, e-books, magazine subscriptions, and other services to libraries. I'll be sharing with you a morsel of my experience of being the one-man IT department at the Prince Rupert Public Library. My background is that of an English major who was also interested in technology. Of course, it would be better to be a computer science graduate who was also interested in literature, but we must play the hand we're dealt. While I am not a software engineer or an electronics technician, I am well qualified to give this presentation because I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night. One of the benefits of working at a smaller library is that I have the opportunity to work on so many different things. In the face of hyper-specialization and business process outsourcing, it's hard to get real hands-on experience with a range of basic skills. CIBC isn't going to ask me to install a new touchscreen and then go work on their database in the same day. In case anyone in the audience now, or anyone watching a recording of this talk, is looking for tangible information they can use to further their own work and their own professional development in general, I'm really sorry. But I will give you 3 overarching principles in case you'd find yourself in my position, needing to meaningfully organize information about the work you do into a 10-minute or less lightning talk. Principle 1. Get the right stuff. When I first came to the library, our public internet access computers and our reference desk had their connection through to the internet capped at 10 megabits per second. We were paying for 100 megabit per second internet, and nobody had had the time to figure out the reason why practically half the computers, including everything downstream of a gigabit switch inside the white box in the foreground, were only getting 10. My immediate predecessor was working 2 different jobs. So stay tuned for how to be the one-person IT and cataloging department at a future BCLA. I made a map to familiarize myself with the network layout, and that way I could see where the potential problem links lay. As I looked at the various connections, I really didn't like the way the ends were crimped. Now I know that crimping is a hard job. I had to crimp a cable successfully for a networking class I took as part of my IT diploma program, but it took me several tries. And just because a cable can do gigabit doesn't mean you'll get gigabit with a less than ideal crimping job. So I asked the chief librarian if we could purchase a special crimping tool to use instead of our existing generic crimper. He agreed that it was worth a shot, and so one fateful day, with only inches of slack on each end, I cut off the existing connectors, cut off as little of the sheath as I could, arranged the tiny colored wires in the proper order. It's Roy G. Biv, right? Slipped them through the special connectors, put the connectors in the tool, prayed to any deities who happened to be watching, and clamped down. Thankfully, it worked the first try, 100 megabits per second through to the internet. If it didn't work, there might not have been enough slack left to try again, and the prospect of leaving the public internet access and reference computers cut off from our internet connection was not something I wanted to discuss with the boss, and I didn't have enough savings to move back to Nova Scotia. In the longer run, I ended up listing and testing the individual links, recrimped dozens more links, and brought gigabit to all the important places, Also replacing the old 100 megabit Cisco manageable switch that probably cost enough to buy a decent used car, with a gigabit TP link that I could plug in and forget about. Spending close to $200 on a special crimper and special connectors may seem excessive, but in this case the investment pays dividends every day with faster internet access and incredibly fast in-house file transfers. Principle 2. Use the skills you have. As part of my IT diploma program, I learned how to use Java and PHP. I won't say I learned Java or I learned PHP because that would be saying too much. I did take a Unix/Linux course, which did introduce me to basic shell scripting, but as I went on to concentrate in programming, I now solve potentially scriptable programs with app development tools. You should never see how a sausage is made, and you also shouldn't see how I turn the reports from our ILS into presentable information. Let's just say I push Java and NetBeans hard. Don't even ask me about the inventory procedure. But if you're savvy, you can use my template and report names to see what kind of a day I'm having. Another related principle: if something is slow, throw hardware at it instead of trying to engineer something better. Leave the optimization for the people who work on your ILS or on stuff like jQuery, Chromium, or the Linux kernel. In our case, we noticed that checking in items on our all-in-one PCs was painfully slow. I looked into their specs and saw they had laptop-grade CPUs by AMD, and this was before AMD got good. I put a proper quad-core desktop into service in its place, and the problem disappeared. Until the day Hatch stopped working on Ubuntu 18.04, so we couldn't automatically print hold and transit slips, and so the Windows All-in-One is back until I get back. I wonder if it might be related to the Oracle Java licensing nonsense. I can't believe they didn't consult me. What I'm trying to get at, though, is that a solution you can get now with what you know is infinitely better than a solution you have to train yourself on something new for. If you're considering taking online courses to learn the thing you're planning to develop a solution in, just stop. Find some other way. The shiny new thing is going to eat time for a long time before it saves any time. My predecessor, when faced with a malfunctioning book ordering system that wouldn't work with modern PHP, decided not to learn PHP just to build a new one. Instead, he put the hard drive into an older computer, and suddenly it worked. That was the right call, and he bought himself precious time to get back to ordering and cataloging books. Of course, when I came on the scene, this older computer lived behind my desk, and the fans were starting to grind. I'd just spun up a new server that was eventually going to get email, DNS, the interlibrary loan system, and file sharing, and I thought it would also be a good destination for this system. So I got the SQL and PHP files exported and then imported, turned on all the error reporting options in PHP that I could, had a terminal with Nano on the left and a browser on the right, and started trying to use the system. I refactored it one problematic line and function after another. When I got it to work, there was a roar. But all that worked because I knew enough about how to use PHP to do it. If I didn't know any PHP, but I had some good experience with, say, Ruby on Rails, coding a solution from scratch with Rails would have been the right answer. There's more than one way to dress a cat. Principle 3. Be patient. Work in bite-sized chunks. The number of concurrent responsibilities you have as a single-person IT department can seem overwhelming, but you won't get very far trying to do everything at once. Take the time you need to decide what you're going to do and do it right. It's like buying the right stuff, except in terms of time instead of money. One of the major projects I'm working on is the resurrection of our newspaper archives. If there's any one thing that I will call my great work, it will be this, unless I make a new ILS during my lunch breaks or something. We use Islandora, deployed using Islandora Enterprise. Islandora, in turn, uses Fedora for the repository and Solar for indexing and searching. If there are any other Islandora or Solar users in the audience, I would love to chat with you. When I came to the library, the existing archive server had crashed some years in the past and was in an irrecoverable state. Several of my predecessors and several summer students had all taken a crack at restoring it. Faced with this, I decided to start from scratch. I needed to learn the system anyway, and trying to fix something I didn't understand, especially where others had tried and failed, seemed like a tough row to hoe. This is an important book. Here's one piece that stuck out for me. We don't really do projects, we do tasks. So, what are the necessary tasks? In this case, I started by installing Islandora in a virtual machine. Actually, I never did succeed in installing it, at least not in the way that search worked. Islandora people will even tell you installing Islandora isn't a picnic. But then I found out about Islandora Enterprise, and I got that running on a virtual machine. Once I got the proof of concept, it was time to get the real hardware. So we ordered the hardware, and this itself was a process. I noticed that the motherboard our vendor suggested for the build wouldn't fit the case, so I found the single micro ATX motherboard that would work with the CPU we needed. But finally the hardware comes. So then, set up the disks. Then install the operating system. Then install Islandora Enterprise. Then ingest a little bit. Then set up search. Then get feedback. Then tinker with search, etc. As I'm speaking today, I have one final hurdle to overcome. I say final with hope. I want to get multiple contexts of a search term in the same newspaper page. For example, here we have an occurrence of strike that refers to a wagon accident, but on that same newspaper page, there are also reports of workers' strikes going on, but they're further down the stream of OCR text, and so they don't show up in the snippet. Future will here. What I eventually did was stick in a high value for hl.snippets, that's an argument that you pass to Solar, inside Islandora Solar Search's query processor. It's making the search returns that you see here, it's making them quite a bit longer, but it does the trick. Transmitting a few extra bytes of text is cheap. Re-engineering Islandora, very expensive. But again, if any Islandora or Solar users are out there, I'd love to hear from you. Out of the many things I do, I selected a few things that were interesting or fit a theme. I could also talk about 30 principles instead of 3. The task of a complete description of my responsibilities and how I discharge them may have to wait until I retire in 2074, age 55, and I'm training my replacement. But for now, I'm looking forward to meeting and learning from you. I can imagine this talk was of little direct utility to most of you, unless Vancouver Public Library is switching to a one-person IT department. But I've enjoyed this opportunity to share with you a slice of my life, and I'm eager to see what you have to share. Thank you. Alright, let's shut this down. Oh, here goes my soda. Slick, slick, slick. Stop.